Hello, and today we're reviewing the Greenworks CS24L210 6-inch brushless pruning saw. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first up we have the battery slot. Now the battery slot in this particular tool is fairly well designed with very little looseness or play to speak of, and the batteries lock into place nice and securely. I've had zero issues with batteries falling free or with any sort of interruptions to the power being delivered from the batteries to the motor. So quite frankly, everything when it comes to the battery department checks out. Now, when it comes to battery life, this particular tool is going to be a bit of a power hog, and you're definitely going to deplete that 2 amp hour battery that comes in the kit very quickly, and so I would highly recommend picking up a 4 amp hour battery just to be on the safe side, unless you have a tiny yard and have very little pruning to do. But for me personally, having multiple 4 amp hour batteries is a must for this particular tool. And of course, since this is using a 24-volt setup, unfortunately that means that you will not be able to adapt batteries over from DeWalt or Milwaukee or Makita or from other brands because of that 24-volt rating. And there really is no adapters for Cobalt or Sunjo, so you really can't adapt batteries onto this particular tool, unfortunately. But with that being said, this particular tool has more than enough power and is definitely an improvement over the Ryobi pruning saw I reviewed last year. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up we have the strap point. Now there is a point on the rear of the tool near the base that will allow you to attach a strap, but no strap is included and you will have to buy a third-party strap in order to use a strap on this particular tool, but at least they're giving us the option for a place to mount it. Also on the side of the tool there is a point where it looks like a belt clip might be able to be screwed on, but unfortunately the hole has no threads on the inside and is a completely smooth hole, which means that this is not actually compatible with any sort of belt clips, whether it's official Greenworks or third party. So quite frankly there's a little bit of a disappointment there, and honestly it's a little bit misleading by the way it's designed. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up we have the grip and ergonomics of the saw. Now, quite frankly, I was pretty impressed by how well this particular saw feels considering the price point. I definitely like the way it feels better than the Ryobi pruning saw I reviewed last year, and I actually like that one quite a bit. This just feels like it's a better designed saw when it comes to the grip. It's perfect for people with medium to small sized hands, and if you have large sized hands, I think it will still feel fairly comfortable for you. It features a nice rubberized texture that will allow you to maintain your grip with the indentations that have been molded into it, and there is hard plastic spots that you can easily grasp onto when you need to anchor your hand to something. So quite frankly, I'm really happy with just the overall feel of the grip on this particular tool. And well, when it comes to the ergonomics, it's a fairly well balanced tool, and the angle of the blade is also fairly easy to work with if you're on top of a ladder or in a tight area and you're trying to be careful. And so I have zero complaints when it comes to the overall feeling of this particular saw's grip or ergonomics. And I was pleasantly surprised by the build quality, since it definitely feels far more premium than what I was expecting. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, next up we have the trigger and safety. Now this particular saw features an always-on safety, which means that you'll have to push the safety to one side before you are able to pull the trigger every single time, since you can't just flip it off. Now with this particular safety, you can push it from either the left side or right side, which means it's a lefty-friendly saw. And quite frankly, that's going to be great for a large amount of people out there that just aren't happy with saws that, well, aren't left-handed friendly. Now, the trigger on this particular saw is made out of plastic, just like the safety, and is a single finger trigger. There is no variable speed, so you only have one speed to work with, but that speed is fast and will make quick work of whatever you're trying to cut through, and is definitely faster than Ryobi's fastest speed. So quite frankly, I'm very happy with the overall performance here, and I have zero complaints. Oh, and it also features an e-brake, which will stop the chain almost instantly, which is another improvement over the Ryobi. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the toolless chain tensioning system, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised after my bad experience with the Ryobi last year. The toolless chain tensioning system on this particular tool is actually fairly decent. I'm not going to say that it's absolutely perfect, but it definitely clogs up way less than on the Ryobi. It's easy to work with, it's easy to get your hands around there, you can tighten it up easily with your bare hands, and it's definitely large enough where you can get a good grip on it, unlike on the Ryobi. So quite frankly, I think it's definitely a way better design. It operates very similar, that when you unscrew it, then you will be able to take the cover off in order to do routine maintenance on the bar and chain, or in order to replace them. And then it's also fairly easy to get back into place with very little hassle or effort needed. I definitely think it's a way better system, and it just works better than what you'd find on the Ryobi from last year. And judging by the fact that I'm pretty sure they discontinued that, since I haven't seen it in stores and I looked around briefly and couldn't find it, I definitely think that Ryobi decided that that was just kind of a bad tool, and they got rid of it from their tool lineup and replaced it with something else. But back to the Greenworks. I think Greenworks did a very good job with the design here, and everything seems to work very well fluidly. I also like the fact that the cover has the tensioning screw that's toolless built into it, and it doesn't fall out, and there's no small pieces that can go missing when you're out in the middle of the forest, and you won't have to spend the next half hour looking for the small tiny bolt that disappeared. So quite frankly, I'm pretty happy with the overall system here, and it's all very easy to work with, and it goes back together very easily, unlike on the Ryobi. And about the only way I think that they could improve the design in this particular area would be to add a small oil tank and automatic oiler for, well, automatic oiling. But then again, Greenworks is sort of known for having a stupid oil tank on their newer generation of chainsaws, so it might be a good thing that this does not have that newer generation oil tank. But with that being said, this particular tool's chain tensioning system gets a pass from me, and even if you do have to manually oil the chain, I think everything here works very well. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the top guard. Now the top guard is the piece of plastic that goes over the top of the chain and will help prevent flying debris from hitting you or other objects, and will also protect nearby branches when you're cutting through a branch in a particular dense area. The top guard is made out of plastic and is fairly robust and has a spring that will snap it back into place once you are done cutting through a branch. It will automatically, well, lift out of the way because it makes contact with the branch you're cutting through, and quite frankly I've had zero issues with this in the field. So everything here gets a pass for me, and it works as intended. Okay, next up we have the bar and chain, and unfortunately it's a bit of a mixed bag. When it comes to the build quality, I don't really have any issues, and they seem like they are high quality parts. Where I do have a little bit of an issue, however, would be the fact that they're both proprietary. There's no other way of sugarcoating it. You're not going to be able to run down to your local hardware or big box store to pick up a replacement chain or bar if something happens to the chain or bar on your tool, and you will be left having to order it online and waiting for it to arrive in the mail if you can find it in stock. Which you can. I'm not saying that it's impossible to find the parts. I'm just saying that unfortunately it's not going to be a quick repair job if something happens to you and you want to get back going that same day. So yeah, I would highly recommend buying multiple chains with for this particular chainsaw if you are planning on using it extensively or you use it multiple times a year. But with that being said, it's not a horrible bar or chain, and they do get the job done. I did test it with several different 6-inch chains, and unfortunately none of the third-party 6-inch chains works with this particular tool. And that can be said with the Ryobi 6-inch pruning saw, which I did not know when I did my review on it last year, which is also a bit of an irritant for me personally. I like having most of my tools have interchangeable parts, at least when it comes to chains and blades. And when they are proprietary, that really irritates me. So the fact that I have two different saws that have two different proprietary blades in the 6-inch category is rather frustrating for me personally. But with that being said, the performance of the bar and chain is acceptable enough where I will purchase an aftermarket, well, another Greenworks official chain in order to make sure I have a replacement on hand. I'll probably end up purchasing a couple and possibly an extra bar just to be on the safe side. And who knows, maybe I will do some experimentations on modifying. But for now, the bar and chain is a mixed bag. Okay, moving on to the weight of the tool. Without a battery, it weighs 1,111 grams, which is 2.4 pounds. And with a 4 amp hour battery, it weighs 1,837 grams, which is a little over 4 pounds. So it's a fairly lightweight saw. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this particular saw in use. And I have to say, it's a very nice experience. It has more power than the Ryobi, and it definitely has a higher chain speed. It will become bogged down if you press too hard and the motor will stop, but all you have to do is back up a little bit and then start the motor again, and then you can finish your cut. I don't really think there's been any major issues when I've used it, and I haven't had any issues with the chain coming off as long as you have it tightened properly, and it's been doing a fantastic job. I will say it is a hungry little tool, and a 2 amp hour battery will only get you through a handful of jobs, and I would highly recommend upgrading to a 4 amp hour battery for better performance. But if you don't have one on hand and you just have a few light pruning jobs, the 2 amp hour battery should be more than enough for a few small jobs. But with that being said, if you do have a larger property, invest in a larger battery. And when it comes to just the overall usability in the real world, when you're using this on a variety of different jobs or a variety of different scenarios, it's been doing a great job. I've used it on 2x4s, branches, and small sapling trunks, and it's done a fantastic job. Just remember the key rule with chainsaw: to keep the chain out of the dirt at all costs, and you shouldn't have any major issues with this particular tool. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and recap with the pros and cons. Okay, first up we have 24 volt. Now 24 volt means that you're going to have more power than your traditional 20 volt or 18 volt power tool, but unfortunately it also means that you will not be able to adapt batteries over from other brands in order to power this particular tool. Fast. This is a fairly fast cutter and is definitely much quicker than the Ryobi that I reviewed last year. So in my opinion, this is a pro. Toolless. I really do like the toolless system on this particular tool, and it seems to work very well. So as far as I'm concerned, the toolless system is a pro. Weight. This is a fairly lightweight saw, and that's going to make it very handy for when you're working above your head or if you're on a ladder. So as far as I'm concerned, this is another pro. Strap point. Having a strap point is going to make this a very useful tool for, well, when you are handling multiple tools at once or working on top of a ladder and you need to, well, let the saw drop free. So in my opinion, this is a pro. E-brake. The e-brake is going to be a nice feature that will allow you to have the chain stop almost instantly after the saw has reached full speed. The e-brake does not work if the saw has not reached full speed yet, so just keep that in mind when you are operating the tool. And the first meh would be 1 speed. It's not really that big of a deal for me personally, but some people do like having variable speed chainsaws, and that might be a little bit of a deal breaker or just a little bit of a downside for them. So that's why it's in the meh category. And the first con would be battery hungry. It's not the biggest con in the world, but this thing does chew through batteries fairly quickly, so having multiple batteries or larger batteries on hand is probably a good idea. Tool lineup. Greenworks' tool collection isn't that large, and compared to other brands such as Ryobi or Craftsman, they definitely have a much more limited category of tools. It's not tiny, but Ryobi definitely has an edge in just the overall diversity of tools that they offer. So there is a little bit of a con when it comes to this particular tools lineup. And the next con would be no oiler. I really do like having a built-in oiler, just because having to carry around an extra bottle of oil in your pocket just isn't that great. So the fact this does not have an automatic oiler is a bit of a con for me personally. And last and definitely biggest con would be the proprietary chain and bar. I really do not like proprietary parts and pieces, and the fact that they didn't go with a standard design is definitely irritating for me personally. I can understand why they did it, but I don't like those particular reasons, and in my opinion, this is a con. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular saw. Honestly, I think it's a great little saw, and I definitely think it's better than its Ryobi counterpart. I think that it does a fantastic job at making quick cuts, and I think it's going to hold up to test the time just fine. I am definitely irritated by some of the design decisions, such as no oiler and the proprietary bar and chain, but for the most part, that really is the only major negatives for this particular tool, and it will definitely do a good job. So, at the end of the day, I think it's a great little saw, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who is currently in the market for a 6-inch pruning chainsaw and isn't locked into a particular brand. And that is it for this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. God bless.